Hello everyone, welcome to my channel SW Metro official channel.
Finally, Robyn's children kicked Kody out of their home in order to put more pressure on him for money. Sister wives, did the Browns make fake accounts to smear Christine? Christine Brown leaves the family first. Christine Brown was one of the 4 wives Kody Brown had. However, she was the first one to leave the plural family. She was no longer content with her life or her relationship. So, she had to make a change. She got to know David Woolley after she left. The two hit it off immediately and got married extremely fast. Fans were worried that she was not thinking this through. However, the two seem to be happy together, and David seems to fit in with her family well. Now Christine is going to be releasing a book soon. Fans cannot wait to read it and see what she has to say about her life as a sister wife and what that entails. Did the Browns make fake accounts to smear her? Fans are convinced that Robyn and Kody Brown made fake accounts to smear Christine Brown before the release of her new book. This is something that would not surprise fans whatsoever. They came to this conclusion because there have been significantly more posts than ever before expressing hatred for Christine. Makes me wonder if child support and custody has finally been ordered for Truly, and Kody and Robyn are upset with the order because the amount of new accounts and Christine bashing is a bit insane. I am sure it is them or their team trying to get a redemption. KNR trying to turn public opinion before Christine releases her tell-all book. Yes, it always feels well-rooted. Yikes. Kody and Robyn are not impressing anyone with their actions if this is true. Robyn and Kody may have created fictitious accounts to target Christine. Both of them would not be able to pull this off. As a result, it's a real possibility. However, this is not surprising to most, as fans hate Kody and Robyn and would expect them to do something like this. Christine is a fan favorite, so they do not expect her to get any hate. What do you think of the current circumstance? Are you shocked? Sound off in the comments below. We would love to hear your thoughts on this situation. Robyn Brown's children reportedly made the decision to ask Kody to leave their home, a maneuver that, on its surface, appeared to be an act of teenage rebellion or a stand for their mother's well-being, but which, upon closer examination, reveals itself as a calculated act of emotional leverage, the final and most effective tool in a long campaign to isolate Kody from his other families and consolidate his financial and emotional resources solely within their own. This was not a spontaneous outburst of frustration, it was a strategic escalation, the deployment of Kody's most potent emotional vulnerabilities, his fear of abandonment and his desperate need to be seen as the revered patriarch, against him, masterfully engineered to apply maximum pressure for financial security at a time when his empire of obligation was crumbling. To understand the profound significance of this act is to understand the complete inversion of the family's power structure, the culmination of years of conditioning, and the ultimate weaponization of a father's love for his children to ensure his capitulation. For years, the narrative carefully cultivated within Robyn's household was one of exclusive victimhood and unbreakable loyalty. Kody was positioned not as a shared husband and father, but as a besieged hero, whose true, misunderstood self could only be seen and appreciated within the walls of their home. Robyn's children, particularly her older daughters, were raised in an ecosystem where their mother's emotional and financial stability was paramount and where Kody's other wives and children were often framed as obstacles to that stability, as sources of drama, disrespect, and unreasonable demands on their father's time and money. This created a fortress mentality, an us-against-the-world dynamic that bound Kody ever tighter to them. He was the valiant king protecting his most loyal subjects, and in return, they offered him the adoration and compliance he felt was lacking elsewhere. Therefore, the act of being asked to leave by these very children was not just a rejection, it was a catastrophic failure of his entire identity within that fortress. It was the loyal guard turning him away at the gate, implying he was no longer the hero, no longer the provider, no longer worthy of the sanctuary he had fought so hard to protect. This psychological blow was precisely calculated to be devastating. The timing of this expulsion is critical. It did not occur in a vacuum but at a moment of extreme financial precarity for Kody. His income streams from the show and his various ventures were being stretched to a breaking point. He was facing the monumental financial burden of funding multiple separate households for his estranged wives. Christine had left and taken her financial share, Janelle was asserting her independence, and Mary was a ghost at the financial feast. The family's collective resources, once pooled for the common good, were now being divided in a costly divorce of assets. Simultaneously, Robyn's household represented a significant and fixed expenditure, a multi-million-dollar mansion in Flagstaff, with its attendant mortgage and lifestyle costs. The threat of being shut out from this home, his primary and perhaps only emotional haven, coincided directly with increased financial demands from the other families and the looming fear that his ability to fund Robyn's established standard of living was in imminent jeopardy. The message from Robyn's children, undoubtedly influenced by their mother's anxieties, was clear: your presence here is contingent on your provision. If the money well was drying up, so too was his welcome. It was a brutal, transactional ultimatum disguised as a familial emotional crisis. Furthermore, this action cannot be seen as separate from Robyn's own patterns of behavior. Throughout the series, Robyn has consistently used her children as proxies to communicate her own needs and dissatisfactions to Kody. They were often the ones to express the sadness he wasn't there for Christmas, the anxiety over the family's conflicts, or the hurt feelings that required mollifying. This created a dynamic where challenging Robyn was tantamount to challenging her innocent children, making any criticism of her seem cruel and unwarranted. The act of kicking Kody out was the ultimate extension of this strategy. It allowed Robyn to apply extreme pressure on Kody without having to directly issue the financial ultimatum herself. She could remain in the role of the compassionate, concerned mother trying to manage her children's emotions, while those children delivered the punishing blow. Kody was then placed in a position where, to regain his place in his cherished home, he had to prove his worth not to Robyn, but to her children, and the only currency that could possibly prove his worth in that moment was money. It forced him to redouble his efforts to secure funds, to prioritize their household's financial demands above all others, and to essentially buy back the affection and acceptance he felt he had lost. In the end, the image of Kody Brown, the self-proclaimed patriarch who once commanded a family of 24, being asked to leave his wife's home by his own stepchildren is the perfect metaphor for his complete diminishment. The man who preached the principle of one house to unite his family was now homeless, exiled from the only unit that still pretended to want him, and only on the condition of continued solvency. This event was not about setting boundaries for peace or mental health, it was a cold, hard power play. It demonstrated that the loyalty he had taken for granted was conditional and that the love he believed was unconditional was, in fact, the most conditional of all. It was the final, masterful stroke in a long game of emotional chess, checkmating Kody into a corner where his only move was to divert every remaining resource to the queen and her pieces, ensuring their security while the rest of the board was abandoned. The children kicking him out was the pressure valve releasing, but it was a valve they controlled, designed to force a geyser of money and commitment from a man who had nothing left to give except what he could scramble to provide for them, forever chasing the illusion of being the head of a family that now only saw him as the wallet. Robyn's children, the purported beneficiaries of Kody Brown's skewed and all-consuming devotion, executed a move of profound and paradoxical significance, one that laid bare the ultimate, transactional emptiness of the very covenant he had shattered his entire family to uphold. They kicked him out of their home. This was not a mere domestic spat or a temporary cooling-off period, it was a calculated, collective decision by the very individuals for whom he had justified years of emotional neglect toward his other wives and 13 other children, an eviction serving as the ultimate indictment of a patriarch who had traded a functioning, if fraught, kingdom for a gilded cage of his own making, only to find the locks now turned against him. The stated reason, to apply more pressure on him for money, was so nakedly mercenary that it ripped away the last vestiges of the soulmate narrative he and Robyn had so assiduously cultivated, revealing the relationship not as a spiritual union but a financial contract that was now dangerously under-collateralized. These were not heartbroken children weeping for a beloved father figure's presence, they were stakeholders in the LLC of Robyn's life, enforcing a clause, demanding liquidity from an asset that was suddenly looking illiquid, treating Kody not as a dad but as a debtor whose usefulness had hit its credit limit. In this single act, the entire carefully constructed facade of their home, The one held up as the model of loyalty and respect against the disloyalty of Janelle and the disrespect of Christine, crumbled to dust, exposing a dynamic not of love and tradition but of leverage and negotiation, where affection was contingent on solvency and presence was predicated on payment. The profound irony is that Kody, who had spent years preaching the principles of patriarchy and demanding unquestioning obedience from his extensive brood, found himself subjected to the authority of a household he could not control, his power neutered by the very sycophancy he had encouraged. He had abandoned the complex, messy, but authentic democratic chaos of a large plural family, where wives could debate him and children could challenge him, for the quiet, agreeable, and ultimately hollow echo chamber of Robyn's mansion, where his word was law precisely because it was never tested against any competing truth. But by creating an environment where his will was the only will, he inadvertently empowered a new power structure, one where his value was purely functional, and when his primary function, that of provider, began to falter, the foundation of his authority vanished instantly. There was no Mary to quietly observe.